All right, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be talking about a very, very special family of fishes, and I'm going to be talking about how this very special family of fishes communicates with one another using electricity. So, what is a mormyrid exactly? Mormyridae is a family of ray-finned electric fishes. There are currently 232 valid species of mormyrids. These fish are native to many of the freshwater bodies of Africa, and the development and evolution of their electrical conducting and sensor organs is thought to have started over 60 million years ago. So this is not a new thing. This is a very old phenomenon that's been going on for a while in evolution. So that's pretty cool. Mormyrids use electricity to navigate their surroundings, also known as electrolocation. They also use it to hunt, establish social hierarchy, breed, and even to have complex communications. One species in the family, Nathonemus petersi, have arguably one of the largest brain-to-body ratios of all animals. And how do they produce electricity exactly? Well, mormyrids have a biological battery, so to speak, that uses metabolism to produce and store energy for their electric organ. This means that the fish can continuously generate its electricity via metabolism. Their electric organ is located in the caudal peduncle, which is essentially where the tail fin meets the body. Electrocytes are specialized cells that start out as myocytes during the development of the fish, but these myocytes typically become muscle cells. But in mormyrids, some of their myocytes start to become more rigid and they become electrocytes instead. Within each electrocyte contains potassium, sodium, and negatively charged proteins. For the sodium ion, there is a lower concentration within the cell than outside of the cell. For the potassium ion, though, there is a higher concentration inside the cell than outside the cell. This creates a gradient, which will generate electricity. Before the fish releases the gradients, however, the potassium and the sodium ions are stored up and ready to be used. And when the fish does release the gradients, sodium will flow inside of the cell and potassium will flow outside of the cell. This creates an action potential, which generates electricity, a pulse. Freshwater is not a very good conductor of electricity, surprisingly, compared to saltwater, or especially compared to wires, due to the less ions it contains that legitimately can carry a charge. Freshwater has much higher resistance due to the lack of ions. The high resistance creates a weaker pulse from the fish. Each electrocyte generates about 1 millivolt of electricity. Thousands of these electrocytes still only produce about 1 volt within freshwater at least. Ohm's law proves this because if we plug in the 1 volt into the equation, and if we know the resistance of the water will be high, then we know that the current will be low. So how do mormyrids utilize this trait that they have? Well, these fish produce electric organ discharge, also known as an EOD. That is essentially a weak pulse of electricity, and it will do so at specific rates. The best way to explain this, in my opinion, is comparing it to breathing. Depending on what you're doing, your breathing will fluctuate. And the same goes with EODs. If the fish is stressed or looking for food, for example, it will send out EODs at a faster pace. However, if the fish is only resting or having a non-stressful communication or conversation with another mormyrid, the EODs will be less frequent. Keep in mind, every pulse costs energy. So now, the electric field. An electric field is established every time the fish produces an EOD. To combat the quick collapse of the electric field after each pulse, mormyrids produce approximately 1 to 6 pulses at rest every second. This helps the mormyrid feel differences within the electric field almost constantly. When they send out an EOD, the electromagnetic wave doesn't bounce off of objects and back to the fish. Instead, the fish senses disturbances within its electric field, such as obstacles, other animals, current changes, etc. Because you might think it might be similar to animals that use sonar or echolocation, but those animals rely on mechanical waves. This animal and other electric fish rely on electromagnetic waves. So, yeah, pretty cool stuff. These fish are especially capable of detecting other animals, as the organic matter that makes up living tissue tends to be more conductive than water itself due to the electrolytes within the tissue. So how do they sense the electric field? Well, mormyrids not only possess an electric organ, but also a tuberous electroreceptive organ called a mormyromast. The mormyromast picks up modulations or distortions within their own electric field from the fish's surroundings. Within the mormyromast, there are two sensory cell types, A and B cells. A cells encode the magnitude or the amplitude of the distortion, whereas B cells encode other parts of waveform variation, such as frequency and phase change. Each mormyrid has their own unique EODs in terms of frequency and waveform, and their mormyromast is frequency tuned to their own EOD. It's like being able to identify someone just based off of their voice alone. Since mormyromast is frequency tuned, since the mormyromast is frequency tuned, they can still perceive other mormyrid EODs through modulation and do so very commonly, but they ultimately will detect their own EOD signal the strongest. And over here, I did have a little bit of a diagram here that I found. This is pretty cool. You can see the electric field here around the fish, and this is the caudal peduncle, and this is where the organ is inside the caudal peduncle. And you can see that the electric field is around the fish, and there is an obstacle, probably like a rock or something, in the electric field, and it can sense that disturbance essentially, which is really cool stuff. This is an awesome diagram. I like it. So communication. The communication aspect of the mormyrid is one of the most intriguing. Mormyrids use interpulse interval or IPI modulations to convey messages to other mormyrids. These small adjustments of IPI timing allow the fish to communicate identity, their sex, intent, reproductive status, etc. to other mormyrids. Some species have also been documented hunting in packs, producing synchronized EODs to communicate with each other. Mormyrids will also get a conspecific's attention by producing a predictable latency, also known as a pause, which is essentially like making eye contact with another person, letting them know that you want to communicate. This is done by a mormyrid sensing another's EOD, and then timing their own EOD after to not overlap the other's pulse. This means they take turns talking, and timing is everything. Sometimes a short latency indicates a possible threat, or it could mean that another mormyrid wants to communicate. Longer pauses, however, typically indicate that it's a less urgent matters. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed it.